Alright, let's get to it. What's up, YouTube? Here we want to...
Numerous underage girls were housed in traffic out of this building behind me, owned by Epstein, a secretive man whose incredible wealth no one can quite explain. But I'm not talking about Jeff. I'm talking about his brother Mark. Mark Epstein has always asserted that he was not close with his brother and was disgusted to learn of his abuse. Going through the files, I have found evidence that these claims are far from the truth. I'll start with this email. In 2013, a woman whose name is redacted asked Mark to write her a letter of recommendation for grad school, and Mark replied by asking if he should include that he first met her 20 years earlier when she was a homeless waif, and that he took her under his wing and proceeded to sexually abuse her, adding, needless to say, we had some fun, if you know what I mean. The definition of waif is a homeless or abandoned child. In this woman's next email to Mark, she asked that when Mark is around her and her boyfriend, that he keep his numbers and his story straight on how long they've known each other. In another email from Mark to his brother Jeffrey about this woman, Mark says, she hates when I tell people that I've known her for 20 years already. Growing up, Mark and Jeff were known as the Dirt Brothers. Here, a childhood friend writes about an incident in which they picked up two girls from a beach, took them out to sea on their boat, and forced them to strip at knifepoint. The Dirt Brothers always kept in touch.
Excuse me?
In this email, Mark asked Jeffrey, do you remember the name of the gynecologist that you used to send your victims to? In a 2009 deposition, Mark was asked, you agree having sex with minors is wrong? And he responded, I have no opinion on that. Like his brother, Mark suddenly became inexplicably wealthy in the 90s thanks to Les Wexner. He used to be an artist, and then in the 90s he acquired this $7 million building from Wexner and now operates a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. In the same 2009 deposition, Mark claims he'd never met Les Wexner. Court records show that this building is where Jeffrey Epstein, quote, kept his girls. Victims were flown here to apartments to be housed and then transported to Epstein's mansion up the road. Jeffrey Epstein trafficked women via a modeling company he helped create called MC2 Model Management. The same year MC2 was created, New York State records show Mark Epstein created a company called Saint Model and Talent. There are no other public records about it, and as of the time of this recording, it is still technically an active company. Mark Epstein is set to inherit an unknown portion of his brother's $600 million estate on top of his already staggering fortune. And despite appearing on TV frequently, no one seems to press him about any of this.
I don't care about the files. Jeffrey's dead. So I don't care of the implications of the files. That's other people's problems.
But for the victims, I'm sure there has to be some sort of satisfaction in it, that they feel that at least someone is, are paying some consequences for it.
Well, from what I understand, he was arrested for crimes related to his position with the government, nothing to do with the thing with the girls. But that's not the topic I want to talk about.
It's a popular theory online that Jeffrey Epstein isn't actually dead, and I would agree with this, because it seems like the entire thing has just lived on through the other Dirt Brother. But I have a feeling that when this comes out, I'm going to be the only Mark punished for any of this.
Oh my gosh, that's very true.
Numerous underage girls...
Yo, we need Mark in jail, in prison, electric chair, whichever. We got the other Dirt Brother to worry about.
Sir, can we ask you America first or Israel first?
Israel first.
Israel first?
Yes.
Before America?
No, of course not.
You fat penguin? That's what you have to say?
Halls, you're going to get in a lot of trouble.
You're a fat, disgusting penguin, sir.
You're a loser.
You're a fat, disgusting penguin.
Loser. You're the biggest loser that ever existed. All you guys are losers.
You're a fat, disgusting penguin.
You're losers that hate America and hate Jews.
You're a fat, disgusting penguin, sir.
Hate America.
You're a fat.
How do you feel about Palestine again? Can you let us know?
I am Syrian.
Nobody gives a shit, right?
You said nobody gives a shit, right?
What? Pal, I'm leaving. You don't have the right to harass people in these halls.
We're just asking you a question, sir. You cursed at us, bro.
I did not curse.
You said nobody gives a shit. We didn't curse at you. We treated you respectfully, fat boy.
I didn't curse.
You said nobody gives a shit. You didn't say that. We have it on camera. Are you going to lie now?
No, you didn't.
You're a lying sack of crap, sir.
You're a loser.
You're a fat penguin-looking PDF, sir. You're a PDF, brother. PDF file. Sir, can we ask you America first or Israel first?
Israel first.
Israel first?
Yes.
Before America?
No, of course not.
You fat...
Hi, everyone. I'm sure you're all seeing the events taking place all over Mexico. And I'm assuming your immediate thought, given everything we have lived recently, is what did the US do? And does Israel have anything to do with it? And if you are not questioning it in this way, you're still asleep. But for those of you that did immediately think this, I'm here to tell you that your questioning of this is correct. In fact, the US and Israel are precisely the reason why there is continuous civil unrest and now imminent civil war in Mexico. It has been confirmed that Israeli Mossad and military has entered Mexico to train Mexican cartels on advanced weaponry and explosives, including how to chemically dispose of dead bodies. And not only that, Israel has been supplying weapons to Mexican cartels as well as providing their Israeli spyware technology in order to give cartels the upper hand on politicians, the military, their police forces, and the Mexican government as a whole. Let me say that again. Israel armed and trained Mexican cartel paramilitary forces as the cartels are using Israeli Paragon spyware technology to control the Mexican government and authorities. And this is the exact same spyware technology ICE is using on American citizens and immigrants. The worst part is, this is not new news. If you do simple research, you'll see that Israel has been training and arming cartels for quite some time now. There is literal documented evidence and even videotape footage of Israeli military training and arming the Medellin cartel in Colombia. In fact, they help train cartels to make people vanish in mass. I highly suggest you watch this YouTube video. Israel is notoriously known for arming major conflicts all over the world in our history because their mission and very existence is predicated on destabilizing the world while trying to make their terrorist ethno-state look like a thriving, civilized democracy that's got their shit together. They've armed militias in Sudan, the Congo, Rwanda, Bosnia, all experiencing genocides of their own as a result. They've even armed Haitian militias, where there is now extreme unrest and insecurity as gang militias are running the country and causing a humanitarian crisis. And do you understand that Israel supplied Russia while also supplying Ukraine during their war with each other? Now, why would Israel do that? And if you did your research, you'd know that this is precisely what they do and have been doing in Palestine. Israel arms ISIS-linked gangs and the Palestinian Authority to fight Hamas, when they also historically propped up Hamas by funding and arming them to create civil unrest between Hamas and Yasser Arafat's Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. This is literally Israel's global playbook. Destabilize to thrive. And don't think I forgot about you, United States of America, who not only permit Israel to operate the way they do, but you facilitate all the destabilization in Mexico and practically every single destabilized region on earth. And remember how I just showed you that Israel trains cartels? Well, one of the convicted Israeli trainers whistle-blew, exposing that they were tied to the CIA. And who do we all know by now is directly tied to the CIA? The Israeli Mossad, which is literally an arm of the CIA, FBI, ICE, ISIS, and everything in between. Oh, and did you know that the US also trains the cartel? Yup. Now let's bring it back to what we're seeing today in Mexico. Let's put 2 and 2 together, everyone. Now why would Israel arm and train Mexican cartels? So that they can optimally terrorize their own country and government, enough so that the corrupt Mexican government has no choice but to partner with the United States, so that they can swoop in and save the day to look like the heroes that stabilized the uncivilized. But in this instance, the US initially tried to distance themselves, where you'll notice that the US gave all the credit to the Mexican military for killing the Mexican cartel leader, El Mencho. When in reality, it's been confirmed on the ground in Mexico that the US Delta Force, a highly secretive Tier 1 Special Missions unit, was involved in the assassination of El Mencho. That, coupled with FBI Director Kash Patel's constant admission that he, along with other agents, have been in Mexico performing operations against Mexican cartels, exposes everything we need to know. This is why you saw headlines start off like this, then morph to this, and are now reported like this. Because the US did this with the help of their masters of destabilization, the terrorist ethno-state of Israel. And the thing is, the cartels all know this by now, which is why you are seeing the cartels all retaliate on a large scale across Mexico. They know that the US didn't just provide the intel, but they were on the ground helping militarily. Remember how I said the US Delta Force was behind this assassination? Guess who came out to play as a result? The Los Deltas, which is the elite paramilitary unit under the CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, which has now been deployed against the Mexican government for colluding with the US in the assassination of El Mencho. And yes, the Los Deltas are deliberately named after the US Delta Force. The thing is, this is all a strategic play by the US through and through, because they knew the cartels would react this way, causing a literal civil war, all at the behest and coordination of the US and Israel. And what do the US and Israel do best? They take the turmoil that they created in order to paint it as inner turmoil, created by the drug lords and terrorists, so that the U.S. can now fully insert themselves militarily to carpet bomb whatever the hell they want while taking control of the Mexican government, thus securing any resources they need to boost the U.S. economy. And this is precisely why we say everything is connected and tied back to the shit starters of our planet, the terrorist ethno-state of Israel and their partners in crime, the United States of America. Have a great day.
Yeah, they're attacking all these Mexican municipality buildings, but they're not attacking the U.S. Embassy. That just lets you know who's supplying them. And you remember all those tunnels? They found tunnels in Brooklyn with those Orthodox Jews coming out of them. Who else has tunnels? And what other island had tunnels? Yes.
Brian is the famous artist, and we always make fun of each other and portray each other in silly, satirical ways.
Theo, as you know, is the latest, hottest, hunkiest teen idol there is.
Yeah. Is he?
I mean, he tries to kiss me on the lips.
No, but
everywhere that
listen, I'm not gonna
act different, huh? You ain't been calling me and hanging out the way we used to hang out.
Mencho, how you been, man? I've been seeing you so long. How much did we drink?
Two men from that set began sexually abusing me. I thought a lot about that. I thought a lot about how these predators have some sort of sixth sense for vulnerable kids.
How do you even build a child molesting robot?
What you do is you start by building a regular robot, then you molest it and hope that it continues the cycle.
Brian is the famous
Push. Yeah.
Today's reading from the JE files is incredibly graphic. It is going to talk about sexual assault in detail. It is going to talk about verbal abuse, and it is going to talk about weaponizing religion. I want to draw that attention to the idea of weaponizing religion because this is what we see sort of weaponized within our own government right now. And I want you to recognize that there is a link and a tie there. That being said, before I read, please take this as your final opportunity to scroll on. If you are not in the right space in terms of your mental health, you can save this for later to come back to it. And if you are around minors within earshot in any way, shape, or form, you need to keep scrolling and or save this video to come back to later when those ears cannot hear. This document can be accessed on the DOJ website under file number EFTA 000-37903. One final note, this document starts mid-sentence, and it appears that there are pages prior to this that for some reason are not included. This starts with the ending of a sentence that just says the time period. I was taken to an underground location. I was blindfolded, so I would not know exactly where I was at. It was dark, and we went through doors. We went downstairs. There was also an elevator in the location. I was kept in a stall. It looked like a horse stall that had short walls on the side so you could see inside. It wasn't really to keep me and the other girls inside. It was to make it where we could be viewed. Epstein would walk past each girl, including myself, with a lot of men following him, and they would judge us. He told me I was, quote, fat and ugly, so that's what he called me. Then there's a whole half a sentence redacted, and then it says, and he said I had to pretend it was him to see if I performed well, which indicates that that half a sentence redacted says that she is going to have to do some kind of act to someone else, and I want to know what name is there. Continuing on, he said if I performed well, I could be his girlfriend, then I would be allowed to be upstairs, he called it. He said the girls upstairs were pretty and they were his girlfriends. He then raped me and said I was evil because I liked it. I couldn't make my body stop feeling, so he said I had to go to the holding place to pray hard enough to be able to be upstairs with the other girls. There were a lot of pictures of girls naked all over the walls. I had to pray hard to be like them, he said. The girls that he said performed well enough went with the line of all the men and they left. And then there's a redaction again. In the next paragraph it says, in Virgin Islands I was completely redacted. They stopped there. I was 17 years old. Redacted, was blindfolded and taken to an underground location. It had steps that went down. I was raped by Jeffrey Epstein. There were other men that raped me. I was kept in a stall so that men could look at me. He said I was an animal and that he was perfect. If I had sex with him, that I wouldn't be such an animal. Then there's a whole redacted sentence. He said I wanted to be raped because I wanted to be more like him. As with all of these, I want the testimony to stand on its own. I will simply say this. What I hear is a little girl who is describing the fact that other little girls and probably little boys were placed in stalls next to her, around her, and then men were paraded around and through those stalls to select their little lamb for slaughter. That is what is happening here. That is what was happening. Men were choosing their prize livestock to rape, abuse, torment, torture, etc. And that is something that I could only imagine being in the plot to a fictional horror film. This is real life.
Yes.
And these are real people. And real justice needs to be brought.
Yeah, we're not stopping. We keep going. We're not stopping. We're not stopping. We're not stopping. We're not stopping.
Okay, so those of you who have been here for a while know that last year, when I was still like diving a little bit into pop culture before I decided to fully hyperfixate on Jeffrey, we did a deep dive into Peter Nygard and his co-conspirator who was kind of taken over his operation and is very involved in like the influencer scene in present day. Here is one of Peter Nygard's co-conspirators, Daniel Fitzgerald, who I believe took over Peter Nygard's operation and still runs it in present day. But for the past couple of weeks, I've been starting to see Peter Nygard's name come up more in the forums. I'm seeing people make videos about him. I'm seeing people make X posts about him. And I just want to share some interesting facts about Peter Nygard and his operation and its parallels to Jeffrey. And then so I can also further explain how rush houring
there's multiple Jeffreys.
Operations don't end if the top dog is taken out or put behind bars. They evolve. So last week when I decided I wanted to revisit the Peter Nygard conversation, I went into the DOJ files and I typed in Peter Nygard and I was actually shocked with what I found. I'm completely surprised that there is a pattern of avoidance. And the reason I was shocked to see literally zero communication is because Peter Nygard and Jeffrey ran such similar operations and they also had dozens of mutual friends between the two of them, including Andrew, formerly Prince Andrew, and big recruiters of Jeffrey's, including Daniel Saeed, like to hang out at Peter Nygard's estate in the Bahamas as well, and there were many other connections. So I was really surprised that there's no communication at all between Jeffrey and Peter Nygard. And just for another example, here's Richard Branson partying with Peter Nygard, and Richard Branson is not only a friend of Jeffrey, but he's also a friend of the man who was sending Jeffrey videos of horrendous things, Sultan Ahmad bin Salam. But I want to kind of like dive into this and really break down all of the similarities between Peter Nygard's operation and Jeffrey's operation, so you can understand the parallels between the two, and you'll better understand why I was so shocked that we didn't see any communication between Peter Nygard and Jeffrey. Jeffrey at any point. And then we'll dive into the evidence of Peter Nygard's operation still running, despite the fact that he's in prison. And we can use that as an example of why we should assume Jeffrey's operation is still running, just in a different font. I think I was also surprised that we didn't see any communications between Peter Nygard and Jeffrey, because when it came to like genetic research and stem cell research, everlasting youth, breeding farms, things that Jeffrey was clearly very interested in and may have brought to fruition, Peter Nygard was doing all of that, and he seemed to be light years ahead of Jeffrey. So for anyone who's not familiar with the name Peter Nygard is the Finnish-Canadian fashion executive that founded Nygard International in the late 60s. For decades, Peter Nygard was deep in the mix of the international fashion and modeling world, but throughout his entire career, Peter Nygard had a reputation. Everybody knew this man was a creep. Everybody knew this man was predatory. In fact, the first time that Peter Nygard was charged with a crime related to SA, it was just after he founded Nygard International in the late 60s. And before the year 2000 rolled around, Peter Nygard would go on to be charged with SA or R word an additional 2 times. But in all of those cases, he was either able to manipulate his victims into recanting their statements or would arrange settlements. So Peter Nygard's ties to the fashion industry and the modeling industry internationally would be like adjacent to Jeffrey's access to models in the fashion industry via Les Wexner. Peter Nygard had properties in New York, he had properties in Canada, he had properties in California, but his most infamous property is his estate that sits in the Bahamas. This specific property would like parallel Jeffrey's Little St. James Island, except Peter Nygard's wasn't like a freestanding island, it was just a corner of an island. At the height of his predation, Peter Nygard was infamous for throwing events called pamper parties. He would invite celebrities, politicians, media moguls, actresses, actors to one of his properties. Specifically, he did this mostly at his Marina del Rey property and his Bahamas property, and his guests would be pampered by Peter's victims. Peter's victims would be expected to give his guests foot massages, shoulder massages, and obviously a lot more. And there's actually still some videos up on Peter Nygard's YouTube of these pamper parties that he was so proud of, but there are also a lot of things that happen at those pamper parties that cannot be shown on websites like YouTube. Hopefully you're seeing a couple of different parallels between Jeffrey and Peter Nygard, and we're not even close to being done. Like Jeffrey, Peter Nygard also had his own version of like a Ghislaine Maxwell figure. Her name was Sue Lynn Medeiros, and she was a Playboy actress who was Peter Nygard's basically #1 girlfriend. She engaged in the same behaviors as Ghislaine Maxwell. She recruited for Peter Nygard. She acted as his assistant. Like Jeffrey, she was not his only recruiter. He had multiple different men and women recruiting for him. And anyone who's familiar with like the lore surrounding Peter Nygard's case, you know that like at every turn, multiple countries failed to stop Peter Nygard as he was actively operating a multiple decades-long international rush houring ring. And in some cases, countries did not just fail to hold Peter Nygard accountable; they would accept bribes and donations to make things go away for Peter Nygard. What's really crazy is the only reason that Peter Nygard was actually stopped was because of a dispute he got into with his billionaire neighbor who lived in the property next to him in the Bahamas. And that neighbor of Peter Nygard's was named Louis Bacon. And Louis Bacon hated Peter Nygard with every fiber of his being, understandably. So Peter Nygard wanted to expand his estate in the Bahamas, and those plans would impede upon his neighbor Louis Bacon's property. And Louis Bacon was having absolutely none of it. Thus, a years-long beef was born. See, Peter Nygard, who had a absolutely out-of-control ego, just like Jeffrey, was so pissed off that his neighbor would not surrender some of his property over to him that he orchestrated a smear campaign against him at an international level. Peter Nygard began spreading rumors to other people in this gated community, to the media, etc., stating that his neighbor Louis Bacon was a part of the Triple K Brigade and that he liked to burn down people's houses. Peter Nygard also accused his neighbor of rush houring substances and human beings. The calls coming from inside the house. This would lead to Peter Nygard's neighbor suing Peter Nygard in 2015, and 10 years later, a judge ruled that Peter Nygard did indeed defame his neighbor. That 2015 defamation lawsuit filed by the neighbor was so detailed and so messy in a good way. And allegations levied against Peter Nygard were so shocking. This lawsuit led the FBI to open an investigation into Peter Nygard in 2015. And after the FBI began investigating Peter Nygard between 2019 and 2020, well over 100 victims came forward in different individual or class action lawsuits accusing Peter Nygard of internationally rush houring them, repeatedly R-wording them, forcibly impregnating them, physically and mentally torturing them, and victimized in other unspeakable ways. And these court filings blew the lid off of everything, which is why Peter Nygard is currently sitting in prison, where he will likely breathe his last breath, hopefully in the near future. Like Jeffrey, Peter Nygard also owned a private jet that he would use to transport his victims from property to property. Peter Nygard hosted figures at his properties, including Michael Jackson, Bush and his wife, royalty, tech executives, to be pampered.
Mayan masterpiece in the heart of the Bahamas. Party central for royals like Fergie and Prince Andrew, Hollywood hunches like De Niro and Connery. Even Oprah visited and later exclaimed, "I'm not living large enough. There's even a human aquarium."
Peter and his friends would engage in something that they referred to as swapping. This would entail victims of Peter's operation routinely being fed substances to the point they were fully incapacitated. Peter and his friends would take turns on different girls for hours while they were unconscious in Peter's home. I think it's that much to assume that things that Peter Nygard and his friends did were likely things that Jeffrey and his friends enjoyed as well. Both Peter Nygard and Jeffrey were both attracted to the same age demographic. I believe Peter's youngest victim recorded was 13 or 14, but he especially preferred victims who were about 16 to 18. And while Peter Nygard and Jeffrey had the same taste, they were polar opposites on other things when it came to victims they were attracted to. We'll dive more into that in a moment, just kind of put a pin in that. Obviously, to lure victims in, Peter would use his money, his social status, tactics of manipulation and coercion, but he also was not afraid to forcibly confine victims. This man would literally lock teenage girls and young women into rooms for days, only entering to violate them repeatedly. And like I know the Peter Nygard story isn't anything new, but if you have not seen interviews from some of Peter Nygard's victims on YouTube or wherever, I highly recommend that you listen to them.
He got me pregnant because I pushed him off me. I told him no, and I tried to leave and escape. He wouldn't let me go downstairs and leave. He said, "No, Brooke, you're staying here. You need to stay. You live here with me." I'll push him off me, but before I get him off me, he already had it. 2 months later, I'm pregnant. So I went to Peter. Peter, I'm pregnant. So what do you want to do? I want to have my baby. Well, what about your career? I'm still have my baby. You're the boss. I can still have my career because you're the boss. And he was like, "Well, you know, you can have the baby if you're going to be a model."
Peter's downfall began at the height of like COVID, so there was a lot of things that the media simply did not report on, or things that were just missed.
I'd never heard of this guy.
Because the media cycle was so insane at that time. And really quickly, I just want to share some details about Peter Nygard's closest co-conspirator, Daniel Fitzgerald, who we've talked about last year, to kind of explain how when the top dog of these operations goes away, another one just steps up and these operations have to be dismantled, one co-conspirator at a time. If not, someone else will just step into that place and the operation continues. The top dog is replaceable. After we revisit this, then we'll dive into the insane similarities when it comes to Peter Peter Nygard and Jeffrey's interest in genetic research. So one of Peter Nygard's longest standing friends, recruiters, and co-conspirators is a man named Daniel Fitzgerald. And Daniel Fitzgerald is super involved in the present day influencer era, and he owns multiple massive influencer homes or mansions that he rents out to different social media personalities or celebrities. The only reason why Daniel Fitzgerald walks free in present day while Peter Nygard sits behind bars is because Peter Nygard still has open cases, as he is currently just serving time for his crimes that he committed in the Canadian jurisdiction. And victims have already tried to bring civil and criminal charges against Daniel Fitzgerald, and they have been unsuccessful, but once Peter Nygard's cases are all completely done, then those victims will be able to seek justice via
Oh, they were competitors, but they definitely were like aware of each other. That's wild. I wonder if he represented or was employed by Rothschild as well, or how he got his finances and whatnot. I've never heard of Peter Nygard. Well, I'm glad he's already in prison, so that's that, but wow.
So Epstein Files Part 2. I'm a clinical molecular biologist. That's what I do for a living. And I was tipped off, kind of, that Epstein had bought a bunch of penguin pineal glands. That's weird, frozen. Started looking into it. I was like, that's a weird signal. Started looking into it. And the penguin, if you don't know what the pineal gland is, back up, right? It sits in your brain. It's an organ, and it's responsible for producing serotonin. It
produces DMT.
Controls your sleep-wake cycles. It's the site of action for hallucinogenics like DMT, right? It's in a ton of like psychological research for like depressive disorder and like mania and schizophrenia, stuff like that. It's in a lot of research for like noetic stuff, like psychic abilities, which is wild. Everybody likes the pineal gland, right? It is very, very broken, gets calcified by fluoride, right? You can actually see it like get cloudy. In fact, like adults today have very little pineal function as compared to like 100 years ago. So anyway, they bought a bunch of penguin pineal glands that are frozen. So I started looking into the differences between human pineal glands and penguin pineal glands. Apparently, penguin pineal glands have a really high concentration of this compound, this enzyme called HIOMT, right? HIOMT is responsible, it's like a little organic machine, so you give it stuff and it like converts that compound into other compounds, right? It is responsible for producing some of the endogenous, like already in our body, DMT that we make. So why would they want this? They can buy DMT. Like I'm sure they have a DMT dealer, right? This video is so gonna get taken down. Because in synthetic chemistry, what we very frequently do is we say, we don't know like the best way to make this compound. Even the smallest changes to compounds can significantly alter their effects. So what a lot of people do is they just like throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. So they give this enzyme a bunch of different compounds, like a racemic mix is what we call it. But they just say, all these random compounds, HOIMT will absolutely work on these and they'll produce new compounds that we've never seen and characterized and identified before. But if we can make them, and if we can make them in high concentrations, we can absolutely separate them out from each other. We can purify them out, right? And then we can give them to unsuspected people, probably because they're evil demons, right? And we can see how they impact humans. So my best guess is that that's what they were doing. That's what the human pineal glands were for, the penguin pineal glands were for, right? Is that they were just trying to give this enzyme just a random mix of stuff and seeing what came out in the wash and then using those compounds in human research. Unfortunately, your brain cannot handle that much of like serotonin input because DMT hits the serotonin system, right? You can't handle that much serotonin input for very long. You will absolutely fry those neurons. So if this is what they were doing, and if they gave those drugs to people, and if they were stronger or had a longer half-life or whatever than DMT, they were absolutely frying people's brains. I can't think of, unless you had someone like me that was on the team that could like preempt all of this stuff and say, we're going to be creating a lot of oxidative stress. We need to get these people on this like perfect diet, and we need to regulate the doses, and we need to have so many breaks in between doses and all this other stuff, right? There's no way you're not going to fry people's brains. So that is my guess, my best guess for why they wanted a bunch of frozen penguin pineal glands.
I barely understood that. What?
This is the story that I never shared online, and before I start the story, I just want to say I am not suicidal. I love my life, and so does my family and friends. So this was when I was in college, and I was pretty young. I got an internship working in Web3 and blockchain back in like 2020, 2021, and I was quite innocent. I was a very innocent young girl in college who just wanted to advance her career, learn, get a job. So one part of my internship program, I got to go to the a huge blockchain conference that happened in Miami back in, I think, 2021. And during that show, it was kind of like a trade show for different technology companies and different like investors and industry people to come together just to see what's the newest and hottest. So I went there sort of with my badge, and then I got to just go around and learn about different companies. And I was sitting at one booth specifically kind of hearing about their pitch, learning about their product, when all of a sudden I got approached by a older man, and this man is probably even older than my dad, and he's late 50s or 60s, it looks like, and he is also Chinese. He doesn't speak a lot of English, so when he approached me, he was like, do you speak Chinese? And me as, sort of an innocent and, friendly person that I am, I was like, yeah, sort of, in my mentality, like, how can I help you? And he started kind of, saying how he was the sponsor of a certain big, huge company, that he's like a main investor in one of the most well-known blockchain mining company. So for me, I was like, wow, it seems like a, sort of a great person to network with and potentially get me a job. And so I was nice to him, professional, and then he was like, let me add you on WeChat, which is the Chinese social media, and then we can keep in touch because my friend is throwing this party in Miami Beach, and maybe we'll stay in touch. And then a few hours later, I got a text from him, and he said, I have this huge party, it's very exclusive, and I want you to come, and it's in Miami Beach, it has all the big industry name in blockchain, and here's the address, yada yada yada. So initially I was quite skeptical because I'm like, I don't really know this man. I always have some kind of an intuitive guy that I feel like this man is not exactly what he seems to be. So my intuition was like, let me think about it. And he was like, oh, you can bring anyone else too. I was like, well, in that case, can I bring my boyfriend? And he was like, yeah, bring a boyfriend. So I felt more comfortable going there because then I have sort of like a male protector / counterpart. And during this, at the same time, I went on his WeChat and I was scrolling to see sort of his background, and turned out he is a decently prominent ambassador, you can call it, or diplomat at the UN. And I see him frequent the New York UN headquarters a lot, and he has all these photos of him with different sort of leaders from different countries. And I thought to myself, wow, this seems like a seemingly powerful person. I was like, why did he invite me to this dinner? But at the time, I was more sort of flattered because I'm really eager to get a job. I wanted to sort of network with people, and so I go to that dinner. So I went to the dinner, and it was probably the most lavish dinner I have been in my entire life. And it was just like wagyus on top of wagyus and truffles on top of like truffles. And I asked one of the waiter and waitress like how much is like a meal per person, and it's like close to $2,000 head count. So I just felt super impressed. I'm like, what am I stumbling into? Because this is kind of like a weird, almost like too out of my game sort of thing for me to attend. I was 21 year old at the time, and we were eating. I was eating with my boyfriend. We're trying to make conversation with other people who were at the dinner, and then we see that the man who invited us, and he was accompanied by a huge group of Chinese people, and he sat in sort of like the main dining area that's decently far away from us. And then we came to just thank him for this dinner, and he didn't, and he came by once to say hi and just like enjoy, order as much as you want, everything, and then that was it. And we had an amazing dinner. The food was so great. Never had anything this luxurious in my entire life. We went back, and it was just, I was like, wow, like, did we just get really lucky that this is a guy who is so well connected, who is so, involved with the UN, and he just wanted to treat us to a nice dinner. And I kind of felt stupid for, having hesitations about this person to start. Until a few weeks later, after I left Miami and went back to school, he kept texting me on WeChat almost every week, quite consistently. He was like, I would love to invite you to this specific hotel in New York. Come over. We have this like UN event. I think you'll be really interested. And I don't respond to him because I just feel like it's very inappropriate, and I don't feel safe going to meet someone I barely know in New York City. Until a couple months later, he started texting me again and was like, you know what? I am in Connecticut. That's where I went to school, and I really need a place to crash. Like, can I please come to your place? And that was the moment I realized this person is quite dangerous, and it's kind of a sort of a predator. So I said, no, I'm now free. I don't have like a proper place because I live on campus. I said, no, I never give him the exact name of my campus or college, and he doesn't really know. And then he seemed disappointed. A couple months later, again, he sends me another message. Oh, I am having a luxurious whatever afternoon tea in New York. Do you want to come? But this time, the message was worded so artificially almost that it seems like it's not really addressing me. It seems like one of those texts you send to a bunch of people just like via group chat. You copy and paste the messages into a bunch of people. And that's when I have started to piece things a little bit together, because what 60-something-year-old man will approach a minor, a 20-year-old girl at a professional conference, invite her to these dinners with no expectations of getting back. And I realized this man is basically fishing all these young girls. And I can't even imagine like the consequences of if you actually agree to meet up with this guy. And of course I blocked him, deleted his contacts from all different platforms, never heard from him again, and really glad that's the way. But I think what makes me concerned and disgusted is how active and connected he is at the UN. I don't see him meeting, women leader. I see him meeting up with mostly middle-aged men from developing country, politicians, business leader, anyone who has connection with the UN. And I'm not saying or claiming anything, but I just feel like that connection is quite concerning. And since then, I've quit the crypto, blockchain, Web3 industry completely, because that industry has so much darkness that people don't discuss enough, so much criminal activities. It is absolutely jaw-dropping. This is a story that...
Yeah, like apparently they're the ones that made Bitcoin, and it's mainly just for like criminal purposes. And yeah, the UN is trash, yo. They let that Yahoo pedophile psychopath speak at the UN and stuff. I'm gonna call it today. So Mark, Jeff's got a brother who's just as bad. He's out there. It's still running, and they had kids in stalls. So that's today. That's what we learned today. Hope everyone has a good day. Hope everyone is being safe. Hope everyone's protecting any young children around them in their lives. And there needs to be some actions against these pedophiles, especially the one in the Oval Office right now. Like, how is he still there and just chilling and nobody's pressing any issues? This is the craziest timeline I've ever experienced. Let's hope and pray that the pressure increases and that there are some consequences and justice that will be met to the pedophile offenders, traffickers, unalivers, human hunters, etc. Peace and love, everybody.